My name is Ed Mitzner, and I'm the owner of a 1929 Henderson KJ. I purchased this from an old-timer over in Santa Ana in 1968, and it wasn't in running condition. It was on the wheels, but it wasn't in running condition. The magneto was shot, and it didn't have an oil pump, so it took me a while to line up a magneto and an oil pump, and I repainted it and put it together. Just basically got it in running condition was about all it did. And I rode it around for, a couple of years in the early mid-70s. And then it got parked for about 25 years. I always intended to restore it, but as time passed, and it never happened. But by around 1997, I was getting more interested, and I started doing a collection of all the parts that I needed to restore it to as close to original condition as I could get it. And by 1990, I retired in 92, I retired in 2002, but by 2004 I had everything I needed to start restoration, and I started the restoration in 2004, and I actually finished the restoration on June the 9th, 2006, when I put the license plate on it. That was the final thing, and rolled it out into the driveway, kicked it 3 times, it started, and I went for a ride around the neighborhood. But as far as the restoration, I did it all myself. I mean, I had things done, the plating, of course, and the painting, and the seat reupholstering. And the engine was originally in pretty good condition, but then last year it was starting to have some problems, so I took it out and I completely went through the engine myself, put new pistons, rings, rod bearings. The main bearings were in pretty good shape. Rod bearing needed replacing, and basically did a kind of minor rebuild on it and put it back together. I got it, and I've got about 120 miles on it since I put the engine back in. But basically it's an inline 4-cylinder, 80 cubic inch, overhead valve on the intake. It's an intake over exhaust, referred to as an F-head. This is your rocker arm cover for the intake valves, and the exhaust valves are down underneath. And like I said, an 80 cubic inch, rated at about 40 horsepower. It's has a regular crankcase sump for the oil, holds 3 quarts of oil. The crank is carried in the five main bearings, with the flywheel in this area and the transmission. It's all one unit. The engine itself weighs a couple hundred pounds. The whole bike probably a little under 600 pounds. The transmission is a 3-speed transmission. It's a foot clutch, hand shift. We've got the rear brake, which is a contracting band brake. It's not a brake shoe in a drum, but it's a contracting band. We can probably get a picture of that later. And then it's got a drum front brake, and on the left twist grip is your spark, advance, and retard, and of course the throttle on the right-hand side. It's got the light switch, high and low dim light switch, oil pressure gauge, amp meter gauge, 100-mile-an-hour Corbin speedometer, which is ran off of a kind of an interesting gear drive on the back wheel. A lot of people get a kick out of that. They ask me, what's the big gear back there? And I go, well, that's the speedometer drive. And so that's the way the speedometer's operated. It's got a Messenger number 3 cushion suspension, which was standard equipment on the KJs. On the valve cover here, we've got Zerk fittings for each rocker that's under the valve cover. There's 4 rockers, 1 for each intake valve, and they can be greased every few hundred miles with this heavy grease. And you can see the lifter, you can see the push rod down here. All of the lifters are all exposed down here on the side. You can see them all operating when the engine's running. And of course it's got a toolbox, and got a little bit of junk in there. And the battery box is right directly behind it. We've got really good springs. It's amazing how smooth this rides. As you can see the amount of cushion. Of course, there's no rear suspension, but we've got about maybe 2 inches of travel on the front forks, on the Springer front forks. And then we got a couple inches of travel on these big old heavy seat springs. So it's a fairly comfortable ride for its day. And everything on here is authentic. All the decal, all the transfers, the lettering, the striping is all exactly to basically pretty close to what the factory did. I've had this bike judged by the Antique Motorcycle Club of America at one of their national meets up in Dixon, California, 2 years ago, and out of a possible maximum point score of 100, I received a 97.75, which it was judged being 97.75% original. So that tickled me pretty good, but I received an award for that. Carburetor, we've got a 6-volt generator, a German Bosch magneto, and of course the generator, the ignition is strictly on the magneto, and the generator is strictly for the battery, recharging the battery when you're running your lights. The transmission is a 3-speed transmission. We pull it back. There's a neutral between low gear and second gear, and then a neutral between second gear and high gear. And you start by depressing the clutch and pulling it back into low gear, take off, depress the clutch just like you would in a car, shift into second, let the clutch out, accelerate, depress the clutch into high gear, let it out, and you're on your way. And of course, when you come to a stop, you bring it back through the gears, and basically driving a 2-wheel car. It's a little more awkward to ride because when you're up here, your left foot's tied up, especially when you're going into a left turn. You're kind of committed to keeping it balanced, but takes a little more skill to ride than a foot shift hand clutch motorcycle. But it's a lot of fun to ride. It's rides smooth. I've had it up to 65 miles an hour. I'm sure that's about the max I will ever ride it, but it would roll along probably 70, 75 without hardly straining. I know friends of mine have had theirs up to 75 and 80, but they're a little gutsier than I am. I'd kind of baby it.